years. I work with the children's department up at the Orion campus. And my passion for what I do is connecting with families. And so much of what happens in church is important, but I believe with all of my heart that what happens in the home is even more important and the most important thing. And so our job and our hope is to our parents to be the spiritual leaders in homes. And so I've been married for 22 years now, which is amazing. And I have 3 boys, 2 in high school, 1 in elementary school. And we are humbled every day. And so the title of this book tonight that we're going to be talking about, No Perfect Parents, is so applicable to me. And I'm sure so applicable to so many of you, because I don't think there's anything, probably the 2 most humbling things in life are marriage and parenting. And ironically, our 2 guests tonight have written books about both. And so many of you know, I'm going to set them up here, and then Dave and Ann just give you a chance to just share what you're doing. But Dave and Ann are founding members of our Kensington church that has just thrived in this community for, gosh, how many years now, Dave? Where are we at? 30 something, 31?
31 years.
31
We started
years.
it when we were 10.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
And you lost your hair at what, 15, right? Something like
that.
Something
Actually,
like
16.
And so, and Dave and Ann, I've had the honor and privilege to know them for 25 years. I was close with all of their boys, and I was actually their junior high youth pastor for those 3 intense years. And, you know, I take a lot of credit for the way they've turned out as men today. And so you guys are welcome for all the love I poured into them. And, you know,
thank you.
Yeah, there you go. Just kidding.
It definitely wasn't us.
Yeah, well, I think I got him into some near lawsuits as well, which we won't go into tonight.
Hey, somebody should ask that question, Ryan, because that's partly true.
We don't want to know. We don't really want to talk about that too much. So anyhow, but David and Ann, just fill us in on what's going on with your family right now. And then also fill us into just what you've been doing the last few months.
You want to tell them about our family?
Yeah, we have 3 sons. A lot of you know this, but I'll just kind of review it. CJ's 35. He's married to Robin. They live in the Detroit area, actually downtown Detroit, which is pretty cool. They have a real vision for restoring Detroit. Austin and Kendall, our middle son, and his wife. She's actually, and Robin's parents are Bruce and Debbie Potts. They go to the Orion campus. That's CJ. And then Robin.
In fact, they actually help head up the marriage mentoring ministry at the Orion campus. Yeah. That's Bruce and Debbie.
And then Austin and Kendall. Kendall was a Puckett, and their family goes to Orion. They met here. They were high school sweethearts. They have 4 kids. They live out in Parker, Colorado.
And Ryan led Austin's small group in what, middle school?
Middle school, yeah. 6th and 8th grade.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then Cody and Jenna are here in this area. A lot of you know Cody and Jenna. They have 2 kids, and that's about it for all those guys. So, and 2 of our grandkids are foster kids that are being adopted. One already was, and the other one will be soon.
And speaking of being parents, now grandparents, we got a text like 4 minutes ago from Cody saying little 2-year-old Bryce literally fell face first on the driveway, couldn't get his hands out. They were stuck in his jacket and hit his head pretty hard, big bump, you know, there you go.
Pray for him.
Yeah.
Don't worry about
They're hoping he doesn't have a concussion, you know, but that's, there you go. That's a step into parenting right there. That can happen any moment, any day. And so anyway, long story short, that's where we are. Some of you know this. We spoke this morning at Orion campus, and if you went to any of the other campuses or watched, we were on video at the other campuses talking about the book that came out on Tuesday, No Perfect Parents. And that's going to be sort of part of our content tonight, talking through some of that stuff.
And we ended our run at Kensington. Dave's last sermons were
Christmas Eve.
And so we're full-time with Family Life Today radio podcast, and we're doing that full-time now.
That's great. And I know I'm saying, I know that guy. You know that guy? I listened to his podcast. So you're having a huge impact in that area. And so as sad as we are not to have you, we're thrilled for what God's using. I can't think of a more perfect way for it. So so thank you so much for joining us tonight. And Susan, who's not on right now, just so you all know, Susan is kind of my co-leader in all of this, and she is the behind the scenes everything. And so Susan's going to be collecting questions. So if you have some, you'll be sending those I believe they are just viewed by Susan and myself, but she'll be making sure that I see those, and we'll be getting to those at the end of the night. So make sure as we go along, you're asking those questions. And so here we are, by the way. So we're talking about this tonight. I know you guys did you guys sell out of these this morning at the Orion campus, Dave and Ann? Did they all go?
Yeah, pretty much. We didn't think anybody would buy books during COVID, but people didn't seem to care. And we had our mask on and we signed a bunch of books, and people took them home.
It was really fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
That's so awesome. Well, I got my advance copy 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago, read through it, and it really is.
Yeah, Ryan,
amazing.
how much did you pay for that copy?
It was an incredible gift. It was an incredible gift from a longtime friend of 25 years. So
since you raised our boys, you deserve it.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. One book. That's awesome. But anyway, great truths that are in here. And so just so those of you that are watching tonight, the questions tonight aren't necessarily going to come from things you heard this morning. If you're one of our campuses or tuning in from around the nation, it's not from the sermon this morning. It's not necessarily from this book. Try to take themes that I heard from this book that maybe they didn't elaborate on as much, and I really wanted to give them a chance tonight to just kind of just dive in a little bit deeper on these things. And again, having known them for 25 years, I know the secrets of success for Dave and Ann and just their kids and their home. I've seen it live. Wanted to talk about that. So we're going to jump right in. And the first thing I just want to tee up for both of you tonight, and Ann, you might even jump on this. And there's one word that has always been present for me whenever I am around you, around your home. In fact, Dave, I know that if I don't make things fun, you're not going to pay attention for very long, right? And so I've known that for you as a person, but I've seen that so true in your parenting. You have pictures of like some shaving cream fight with your boys when they were teenagers going on all around your house. It was like a photo shoot with shaving cream. It's the most amazing thing, yet the most bizarre, crazy thing I've seen, and hanging in people's rooms in really nice picture frames. But fun is the word. And so I just want you to talk what that's done for you, but also share out what you would advise other people, because not everybody's you. Not everybody's, the fun, the life of the party. And how do they find the win for their kids so that they say, I love my home? So, yeah.
Yeah. And I'll say this, in the book is chapter 8. If you get the book, start with that chapter if you want. Because Ann wrote that chapter, and I think she did. And she talked about it a little bit in the message this morning. I think you did a great job of what you just asked, Ryan, trying to help parents identify, who am I as a parent? What are my gifts? And then bring that to your home. She called that chapter, Make Your Home a Haven. And like you said, Ryan, a lot of it is just the way we're wired. I mean, we're both Enneagram 7s. So that should tell you a little bit right there.
That's the enthusiasts. We're adventure, we're fun. And so but honestly, one of the reasons that started and that became a passion for me was I felt guilty, and I was comparing myself constantly to other moms.
Right.
I'm different. I feel like we were around the Andrews family, and they were amazing parents, and they're listening to the classics and literature in their cars on trips. And our boys, are you kidding? They would never have done that. They're listening to jock rock tunes. And
Right.
And so I remember thinking, oh, our kids would be so much better off with these other moms, because, I'm just not like that. And it was Callie Nelson actually that said, I really feel like God has placed me in my home, knowing my gifts and knowing the kids that would live under my roof, whether they're step kids or adopted kids or our own biological kids, for a purpose, because I have something in me that my kids need. And that really started me on this journey of saying, okay, God, who am I? And what do I want to create as a haven? Because there's a crazy world going on outside of our homes. Sometimes in our homes, there's a storm in our homes. We know there's a storm outside, but we want to do everything we can to create a place where when our kids walk in the door, they're seen, they're heard, they're celebrated. I mean, those things are big, especially in our culture today. So I just thought, who am I? I love to have fun. And I feel like, and Dave and I have talked about this, people are attracted to joy. They're attracted to memories. And so I was like, I'm going to do everything I can to create memories. So You know, we'd throw ice on Dave in the shower. I'd drive around in circles.
A lot.
The shaving cream thing, every single year at the end of the last day of school, we'd have these shaving cream slip and slides that were amazing. We did that for years and years. And also we wanted to create a place where everybody in the neighborhood could come to our house because it was fun. And so, and they did do that. Like all these kids were there constantly. Dave and I were outside because that's who we are. So you might be thinking, okay, that's not me. And it shouldn't be you. You shouldn't copy what we do. You should ask God, God, who am I? Do I have a passion for art or literature? Or am I, you know, who is that?
Music, reading. I mean, like we mentioned, other families had different. And here's the thing, the temptation as a family or as a parent is to compare yourself and think that we should be more like the Andrews. In fact, I can't tell you how many times Ann told me I should be more like Steve Andrews. And Ryan, you know, Steve and I are completely different guys and dads. And it took a while for me to realize, no, God made me. And that's a good thing. And God made Steve. And that's a beautiful thing. So for parents listening, it's like, who are you? What passions and gifts and abilities and that drives you, and bring that to your home so that your home becomes a safety net, a place where your kids, when they walk in the door, feel like I'm seen here, I'm believed in here, I feel safe here. Because out there, and again, there's nothing wrong with the world, but the culture is honestly often tearing down our kids because they're trying to build themselves up. And so how do we do that? We tear down somebody else. You know, and you don't want to come into a home where the parents are doing the same thing to your kids. You want to come in a home where the kids feel like this is a place I want to be. Of course, at 18 or 19, you want them to send them off.
but let me say too, if you don't know what to do at first, just have food. Just have food, have some music on, and kids will come and they will gather, even or just around that alone.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you know, and it's so, you talk about just being available to your kids too. And I just think of, and I've seen this with both of you with your children. It's like you will drop what you're doing to listen. You will drop what you're doing in your life. And I'm not a night person. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I'm happy then. And at 10 o'clock at night, my happiness ratio just goes down. And at 11 o'clock, I'm just counting the minutes till I go to bed. And yet I have two boys who come alive at 11 o'clock. And the number of times where they've walked into this room on this couch over here and have wanted to suddenly engage in some life-changing, deep conversation. It's amazing. I laugh every time, and I'm literally trying to pry the toothpicks open to listen. But I've seen when I've shut them down, and I've seen when I've opened up, and I've realized, okay, they felt like they were heard, and we engaged in that moment. So anyway,
and Ryan, let me add too, the conversations we had with their friends happened then too. We had as many good conversations with their friends as sometimes our kids. And a lot of those, you're right, with teenagers, they happen late at night. Sorry for you morning people, but Brian, you're a great breakfast maker.
Yeah, that is part of my identity, which maybe we'll talk about in a few as well. So let's talk a little bit. One of the things, you know, and we've heard this through the years, it's just leading in the home. And I think it's one thing to say it, and it's a whole nother thing to do it, right? You know, we always hear this, you know, if you've been around the church at all, you hear men, you know, Dave, you talked about this, men, you need to lead in your home. And that's really good. But when you really get down to it, it's really challenging, whether you're a man or you're a woman. I think oftentimes, you know, moms see something they want to have happen and they want dad to do it. And there's single moms that are watching tonight and you feel like you have to do it yourself. And we want to talk about that a little bit too. But Dave, I just want you to just share a little bit about what does a win look like when it comes to leading in the home, even just some practical examples. And I think you've shared a little bit. You can even just give a little background on what was really difficult and why it was easy to lead outside, but it was really hard to lead inside. Maybe we can start with that first.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought, and I've said this, you know, for decades at Kensington, I don't think people probably believe it because it sounds like this wouldn't be true, but I've said it was really hard for me to lead spiritually at home. It was easy to lead spiritually at Kensington or with the Detroit Lions in different ministry, public settings. I felt like I was trained to do that. I was gifted in certain ways to do that. I knew what to do. And I'm not saying I did it perfectly, but I felt like I went to school for this and I know how to write a sermon and how to give a sermon and how to lead a Bible study and how to speak to the lions at chapel. I walk in my house and I look at my wife and 3 boys sitting there and it's almost like, okay, how do I do this? You know, how do it was scary in some ways. Part of it was I knew what Ann wanted me to be, that I wasn't going to measure up to that bar, which was way up here, you know.
So now you're blaming it on me.
I'm blaming it on Ann. It's all her fault. But and again, you know, I look back and, you know, we wrote in the book, the last chapter was our top parenting mistakes. And I would say one of those for me was just passivity. I talked about this morning at Orion that it's sort of the curse. We tend to be passive rather than step in and act. And I think rejecting passivity, the first pillar of manhood, you know, is really about courage, having the courage to just take a step. You know, leading is just starting to walk in a certain direction and people will follow you. So I think, you know, it ended up being, I'm going to lead. And that means we're going to pray or we're going to open the Bible or we're going to grab a moment in life and say, hey, time out. What's going on here? Let's talk about this from a spiritual, biblical perspective and just see where it goes. I remember one time Cody and I were watching TV in the family room and something came on about premarital sex. And I hit the pause button and I looked over at him. He must've been 15. I said, hey, Cody, what do you think God thinks of premarital sex? He's like, it's wrong. I go, why do you say that? He goes, it's in the Bible. I go, where's it in the Bible? He goes, I have no idea. And I'm like, go grab your Bible. Let's talk about this and look at it. And I have no idea if he remembers that conversation, but there it was, a moment to seize the day, you know, to carpe diem, to grab it and say, man, here's a teachable moment that I can have with one of my boys. And that's leading. That is, as simple as that was, that 5-minute, 6-minute conversation was a moment to lead. And it takes courage to say, okay, I'm not going to let this moment slip by. I'm going to grab it and I'm going to see how God shows up and does something in it.
Yeah.
I think that women, I think a lot of times women do lead spiritually in the homes and they don't want to, you know, I mean,
sometimes they do.
Yeah. I mean, I like doing that, but also I shouldn't say it that way. They may want to, but they also want a partner in it. You know, that's why I give the single mom so much credit, man, because they're doing so much. But I think even for men, if you initiate, hey, you guys, we're going to pray at dinner, ask one question at dinner or pray with your kids before they go to bed. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be, Lord, thanks for the day. Thanks for our family, protect our kids. That could be it, you know, but I'm telling you, that has impact on your kids and on your wife if you're married.
Yeah. Tell me, you know, and what as a mom, like, what were the good things that you did when you felt like you were leading? What engaged your boys? And I think we can all be honest here. Not a lot of kids get excited. Yay, we're going to open the Bible tonight and we're going to read it together. And I'm going to get asked questions about it. I mean, we'd all love for that little house on the prairie feeling, right? But it just, in reality, it just doesn't happen. So what did it look like? What was the win for you? I mean, Dave asking those hard questions, I can see that 100%. But what were some other wins that you felt like you got?
I think I really did. Well, let me say this too. I thought I did some really cool things like discipling them in these Bible studies. I asked them, like, you guys remember this? No, they say no like, we don't remember anything you did. I even asked them, I can't remember which kid it was, but I asked them when they were like 13 if they could name any of the 12 disciples. Well, Moses and Noah were 2 that they named. just so everyone knows, you can feel good about yourselves. But here's the thing. They don't remember all that stuff. And I think probably like CJ has a great memory. He might be remembering some of it. They do remember that they listen to these adventures in Odyssey at night. Isn't that crazy? Remember those?
Yeah.
Like these storytelling things at night that are biblically based. They remember those. But the thing that I did was I realized that I can't do any discipling or spiritual leading unless it's in me first. Whatever we fill our minds with comes out of our mouths. And so, man, I would listen to the Bible online. I would be like if, when they're little, it's hard to have time reading the Bible, but I would pray out loud all the time with them. I'd have worship music playing. And honestly, we would just pray in the morning before school. Man, the bedtime thing was huge for us because kids don't want to go to bed, and they lay and they talk. We'd have these little devotionals. We'd ask about God. Even with their friends, we'd have discussions about God. I would share the gospel with their friends. When the kids were there, we'd pray for their friends. And so mine was more like walking along the way. It's that Deuteronomy 6 of just talking about them all the time. And we'd all go on these things where one time I was like, hey guys, I feel like I was supposed to buy this coat for somebody homeless. So I buy this winter coat at Costco, and I get in the car with these 2 high school kids that I'm discipling. I think Cody was like a freshman in college, home for Christmas. And we're like, you guys, let's go downtown Detroit and find our homeless person.
Yeah.
So we go down there, we're praying, and it was this crazy, scary adventure, but it's also teaches them like God speaks, and there's something great about obeying when he calls us. I think kids want to see that God's real. And he calls us to do things sometimes that are scary or cool or uncomfortable.
Yeah. I say that, kids are chameleons. They will become who they are around, and that's true with their friends. Yeah. But part of that is what's happening in the home as well. And so even though they might reject some of the values and the things we want, they're still watching and they're still incorporating things. And so just even if you want to talk about discipleship, it's also just in how you are living your own life, right? And the very example that they're seeing of you in your home, from the way you talk to the way you love to even the way you engage with God, whether it's in the Bible, in prayer, or in worship, And so they're seeing that. And anyway, very, very critical. So, and also I'll say this too: small wins to start. Like it could be just a simple prayer on the way to school for so many parents, right? It's not you don't have to have some theology degree. It's like pray one time. It's like one little win. You do that 5 times a week. Oh my, it's a huge thing, right?
Yep.
So yeah, great. Now let's talk about this. You talked about the bullseye. It's in here. I know you talked about actually it's on the cover of the book. And you're combining 2 things, right? You're combining mission and identity. And I really liked, especially, and you can unpack a little bit of that if there's more to talk about if you think there, but I just want to talk about that identity piece, because I know all 3 of your boys, they're all so incredibly different. They're so wonderfully made in who they are as who they were as young men, who they are now as men. But just talk about how you really tried to connect with their identity to their mission and their calling. Can you share a little bit about that?
I would say, like you said, Ryan, we, just like any other parent, had initial thoughts that our kids will be like us. They'll just be like us, personality, gifting. And then as young parents, we realized with son number 1, then number 2, then number 3, wow, they're totally different than us. And we sort of noticed other parents trying to shape their kids to become like them rather than stepping back. I said it today at Orion, like, I think a parent needs to step back almost every day and look at their kids and go, wow, almost like, I'm amazed at who God is making you and made you to be. You've got this gift and this passion. And, we talked about it in the book as well. Speak those kind of life words out. Life and death is in the power of tongue. So speak into them words of life that are uniquely tied to their identity. I mean, you can build that out. And then also speaking into what you dream with them, their future could be based on who God made them to be. I mean, our number 1 son, CJ, you know him. He was a technical, analytical dude from the first 6 weeks.
Introvert.
Yeah. I mean, we tell this funny story about when he was 2 years old, 3 years old, I was giving him a bath and he's staring at my forehead.
He's 3, yeah.
I think he's 3. And I knew even at 3, I'm like, this dude is thinking something, because he's always analyzing. So I said, CJ, what are you thinking? And he looks at me and he goes, hey, Dad, so how old were you when your head started sucking your hair back in? And I'm like, of course, that's what he's thinking, and he's always been that way. And so, you know, we started dreaming with him at 5 and 10 and 15. Like, how does God want to use that gifting, the way your brain works, the way you're technically minded and gifted to bless the world, to help others, to, you know, be a blessing to others? Because that was part of our mission, you know, to be, make a dent where you're sent was sort of part of it. So how can you have an impact? And today he's doing that. You know, it's pretty cool. In the workforce, God is still using that. And I'm just so glad we didn't go, hey, you should be like this. You should be more. No, it's like, no, step back and go, man, they're fearfully and wonderfully made by God, and they're different than us. That's awesome. We need to get beside them and dream with them. Like, man, maybe God wants to use this in this way, or maybe he wants to do this. What could it be?
I was thinking about just this whole thing with identity stuff. And even at the dinner table, I can remember when they were a little bit older, I remember asking them, hey, guys, what do you think about all the time? And it was so fascinating, Ryan. Our oldest, CJ, said, oh, I think about how things work, which I'm like, oh my gosh. I think Cody said, like, I think about routes that I could be running. And, you know, it was so fascinating. And even when they were really little and we would lay down in bed with them at night, I remember, like, this is 5 and younger, I would say, I can't wait to see what God has for you. And they would say, is it a present? I said, kind of, because when you discover who you are and why God has made you, it's a real present. And so what that also does is it keeps them from comparing themselves to one another or other kids, because why would they want to be like someone else when God has made them so unique and he has something for them to be discovering? And the way you discover it is to get closer to the Father.
And I would just add this one last thing, which is a big thing. So I don't want to say too much about it, but I also think the identity piece is so critical to be speaking life as a parent about their identity as a child of the King. You know,
Yes.
I think that they're outside our home. People are going to be speaking death often, discouragement, cutting them down, critiquing them. Again, I said it earlier. I think a lot of that's because they feel insecure, and it makes them feel better by tearing down their classmate or teammate. And so again, making the home a haven is like, man, they start to feel like, man, when I'm in my home, my mom and dad, they're saying I'm great. They're saying they see beauty in me. They see it that they're affirming me and building me up. And those words are so critical for your child to hear from mom, from dad, from mom and dad in the home. And we can miss that because, and again, I'm not saying you don't speak truth. There are times where you have to say hard things and be critical, but man, it's depositing. I shared this morning, which obviously isn't in the book because it happened on Monday, but on Monday, after we did the Today Show with our book, we went to Disney World with Cody and Jenna and Bryce. And I was literally walking by a dad, you know, sort of a lot of people at Disney World. And I hear him say to his 10-year-old kid, obviously he's frustrated like every parent at Disney World, right? It's just a place for frustration. And all of a sudden I hear him say to his 10-year-old kid, listen to this. He says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put a for sale sign around your neck and put you up for sale right here, right now. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that poor kid's going to be in a counseling office the next 20 years. I mean, those are death words. And I know he's frustrated. And I get it. I wanted to just put my arm around the dad and say, dude, I get it, man, but you got to be so careful with your words.
I told that too. Like another mom with 2 teenage boys said, you know what? Because you guys act like this, I have to drink every night. You're driving me to drink. I was like, oh my gosh, when we all get it as parents, like it's so frustrating. And let me differentiate here too, because we're living in a world that there's a mantra. It's kind of like this Disney movie thing that says, be true to yourself, fulfill your dreams, you know, that kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. If there's a big if here, we're saying what we're saying is different. It's the gospel. It's discovering who God made you to be. It's not you discovering like, you know, like my sexuality and all that kind of stuff.
Looking in.
This is looking up to what God says. There's a difference. Our society is looking this way. They're looking horizontal to find their purpose and out instead of looking up. Looking up is where we teach our kids to find their identity from God.
That was a long answer. Sorry, Ryan.
So good. No, it's good. No, I mean, we wrestled. We had and all parents, and if you're a high school parent, you have a parent of a junior. This last week was the SAT week, right? And it's that one time where
Whoa.
suddenly it's one of those moments for all teens when you are literally getting compared. You are given a number, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that number tells so much about what's going to happen in your life, in the next 4 or 5 years. And I saw my son just sweating and dreading and really wrestling with this moment. And we had to do that. We had to speak identity into him, because there's parts of that test that just honestly aren't him, right?
Yeah.
He's, if he's getting my gene pool, it's going to be tough, because what was I on the SAT? It was awful, right? I'm surprised I even got into any school. Anyway, it's so critical, and we're feeling that every day. Let me ask you this, because it's not only identity that we're trying to pass on to our kids, it's also our identity that we're modeling as parents too. And
Mm.
we even as a parent, I take pride in what my kids do. I'm looking at social media. In fact, I've taken a little break from social media, honestly, because I kind of just got tired of the pictures, right, and the perfect moments in time. Can you speak a little bit about what we as parents need to realize in our identity? It's not about parenting, it's about who we are first. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Personally.
Hmm. Yeah, I would. One of the things that's really hard as your kids get a little older is, man, they can be hard on you as a parent, and they can be mean and say mean things, and it can affect your self esteem as a parent. Like, I must suck, and maybe I'm messing up my kids so bad, and so I think that whole thing of not taking it personally is really important. If we based our identity on how our kids treated us every day, now little kids, they love us, they think we're awesome, but as they get older, man, they really hurt, and they say things that are super hurtful. So for us as parents, even to go before God and to have him remind us, this is who you are, I've called you to this, I think that's huge, Ryan. Because I think I found myself sometimes feeling really defeated as a parent when our
Sure.
kids can act like we're not too great. And
No.
they will compare us to other parents. Like, oh, they have the coolest parents ever.
Mhm. Oh, we've heard that. If I base my value on that, and
Right.
Yeah.
this too, and I've heard chapters, they do leave you, right? They do grow up, they do go away, they
Yeah.
do get married, and at the end of the day, what are you left with? I know
Yeah.
you've talked a lot about your marriage, importance of that for when the kids leave, but as an individual, and can you speak to that at all, just the individual, what your identity as a mom, as your boys have grown up and married, what have you had to do to strengthen your own confidence in who you are?
Yeah, it's interesting too, because it's so when our kids were little, I remember I use this quite a bit. I would say, I don't even have a life anymore. I hardly use my gifts anymore. And that was a wrong thing to say, because as they got older, I realized, oh, that was like, I loved that life,
Yeah.
now that they're gone, I love that. And when they left the home, that's when I was like, now who am I again? Because you're such a mom. I think that mom thing, it never leaves us. Where moms carry the weight of their kids, their emotions, all of that all the time. And so even when our kids were gone, it had these new questions of, now what, Lord? What have you called me to now? And you have put things and gifts and passions in me, and how can I use them? I think that's a really good question to continually ask yourselves, because you're not just a parent, you're also this child of God that God has made to pour into other people. And what does that look like? Is that kind of what you're looking for, Ryan?
I think so. I think it's just I just know that all parents are going to struggle with who they are at some point when their kids walk away. And I want to say this real quick too. It's my internet. I apologize. Some of you are struggling. I was going to be at the church tonight and I couldn't log on to the church's internet. So I'm at home and we've been struggling for the last 2 weeks. We have gremlins somewhere in our system. So I apologize to those of you. So anyway, but yes, I guess I want to say, like, if I had 5-year-olds right now and it was my life, I just want to, what do I need to know about who I am? Because again, that 5-year-old is going to be 25 soon, 20 years. But it's going to go by fast. And what do I need to maintain during that time? And I
Yeah.
think Anything else to say about that before we move on?
I mean, I think it's what you said, but I do think it's easy as a parent to sort of measure our self-worth in how our kids are doing. If it's in their faith or if they're making really bad decisions, it's really easy to think I failed or I didn't do a good job. This is my fault. And you know, I joke about it, but I say, man, don't evaluate your job as a parent when you have teenagers.
Right.
Their brains aren't fully formed. They're probably going to make some really dumb, stupid decisions. I made some horrible decisions when I was a teenager. Our boys did as well. Wait till they're 25. And now that I have a 35-year-old, I say, wait till they're 35 before you evaluate. I'm kidding. But it's like, it's very easy to think, you know, if I do everything right, then they'll probably not make bad decisions. If I do everything wrong, they're going to, it's not correlated that way. You can do everything right and it doesn't guarantee anything. Not that you shouldn't try, and you can do everything wrong. And so you got to just, at some point, and we said it this morning, you've got to surrender and resurrender your kids every day, every hour to God, and say, they're not really ours, they're his. And he's going to do a better job with them than we are. We do our best. We get on our knees, we ask him, and we pray, and we try to live it out in front of them. But at the end of the day, we have to entrust them to our Father.
I also think, Brian, parents, we can be hard on ourselves and we can be judgmental toward other parents. Like if somebody's kids are going through a real rebellious time, or maybe a time of depression and anxiety, I think we're like, oh no, I don't want my kids to go through that. Or maybe you are. And so we feel so much shame if our kids are struggling that we don't open up and share about it. And the greatest thing you can do is share that and get other moms and dads that are going through, everybody's going through stuff. There's never been a harder time to parent than right now. The effect of the internet on our households, our kids are looking down at their devices constantly, and so are we as adults. And I'm telling you, it's impacting our kids. And we need a support system of community, of people that are walking through with us, where we can be super vulnerable of saying, you guys, my kids are struggling and I'm struggling. I feel like I'm failing. Satan loves it if we keep it all a secret, because then the darkness just wins, and our kids need us to be open. And I think that that's really important. Don't judge each other, man. We're all just struggling to get through. And so pray for each other's kids.
And how do you mentioned this in the book, how do you not take it personally? You know, those horrific things when your children deliver a line to you that, you know, and let's just be honest, like to hear that you're the worst parent ever, that's soft. That's not bad. Like, we've all heard the worst of things in the world involving words that we couldn't say here tonight.
It's such a good question.
If you haven't, you very well might like to hear it. Yeah. So how do you not take that personally?
It was interesting. I was in Dick's over Christmas, and this mom was there with her teenage son, and she has this pair of gloves, and she says, "Do you like these gloves?" And this is what he says: "I hate you. Get out of my face." I was just like, I wanted to just cry with this mom. It was so hurtful. Here's a little thing that I did, and this helped me because my feelings would get so hurt. I would say to the boys, this is especially during teenage years, when they're younger, if I'd say, hey, you want to go out and do something fun and then go grab something to eat, they're like, oh yeah, that'll be fun. Well, when they get older, they don't necessarily want to do that as much. And so I said to the boys, like, hey, we're going to go out every other week. I need that. And that's what I said. I'm realizing that we're butting heads a lot. And when I don't spend time with you and I'm not really, like, we don't have great conversations, I get short and snappy. And then we cycle and you get mean and I get mean. And so I just need to sit down with you, have conversation, just hang out. I just want to know how you're doing and how is your heart. And they might be like, oh, whatever, this is mom's thing. But there was something about just sitting and being eye to eye with them and just asking them questions like, man, how are you doing? And also, man, it's just so big to speak life into them. Like, man, I think you're doing really well in this area. How do you feel about it? Or how do you feel about your friends right now? They may open up and they may not. one of our kids, I felt like the conversation was so one-sided. I would just watch his facial expression. And if he'd be like, I'd be, oh, so it's not good. You know, he didn't even answer, but I'm answering for him. But that, and I said, when you get married, like this conversation is really important. It connects my heart to you as a woman. And even with the daughter, the same thing. That really helped me to not take it personally, because it's like, oh, I see you. I see you and I like who you are. And that really and that helped them with me too. It was just a little tip. And then maybe I would, would go do something they would like to besides that eating. That really helped us a lot.
That's great. You guys have talked a lot, and again, so much of your what's the glue for you guys was the relationship that you just continually developed with your kids. And Dave, you said this time and time again. You came and spoke at Breakaway. This was probably 20 years ago at Larson Middle School. You said it time and time again from stage. You said rules without relationships equals rebellion, or lead to. And so share a little bit just about what that really means, and how much time you've put into that, because I mean, and are you going to get rebellion anyway? I mean, are we going to get it no matter what? Is it going to happen? Because I think every teen rebels, but talk about just the true meaning behind that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, Ann said to share some graph. I don't know what graph you're talking about.
High control.
I don't know.
Yeah, anyway.
I have no idea. I just know that I had to decide that the disciples that I'll be held accountable for in heaven are not the people at Kensington. Again, not that doesn't matter, but they're my sons and my family. And so at the end of the day, it was a really hard decision. I had to decide, as important as my job is, and as being a pastor, it's not the most important job, because I would typically come home from work exhausted and walk in the door with the desire to rest, and when Ann would like hand me a baby or say, hey, can you take the boys? I would literally look at her like, are you kidding me? Do you realize what kind of day I've had? And blah, blah, blah. And of course she's feeling the exact same thing.
Me? You know what I've been going through today?
Yeah. And so there was a moment when our boys were little boys that I really realized that my most important job is not being a pastor. It's being a husband and a dad. And so on my drive home, and I put this in the book, but it was like, I needed to shift my mindset to say, and I had a mailbox that was right on our drive home. And I would just visually like open the mailbox and take Kensington and put it in the mailbox and pull out the dad husband job description and say, okay, when I drive in my driveway in a couple minutes, I got to have 100% energy. And I know I don't have it and I'm exhausted, but guess what? I'm going to suck it up and give everything I got for the next 3 or 4 hours tonight. And I'm not saying I did that perfectly, but it was like, this job, as I step into my driveway in my family room, is the most important job I have. Trust me, it just happened. I can be replaced at Kensington pretty quickly, actually. 30 years, founder, preaching every weekend. And in 1 week, a new guy comes in, Craig McGlasson. And within a month, people are like, wow, he's awesome. Dave, who? But let me tell you something. I can't be replaced in the Wilson household.
No.
There's nobody that's going to just step in. And I could die and Ann could get remarried and there'd be another guy. There's no way they'll ever be the dad to my boys. I'm the only one. And so that's how critical that job is. And so to answer your question, that was a long journey to, well, okay, now they're teenagers. They're pulling away from me and because they're becoming men. And at first we're like, what are they doing? Why are they pulling away? They are gonna pull away. That's natural. That's normal. We shouldn't even be surprised. We should be like, good. That's them maturing into manhood. But at that point, many parents sort of think, okay, they're pulling away. I'm sort of done. I don't want to. No. That's where you got to pursue, and build that relationship. And again, you're going to say, hey, let's go grab a bite to eat. And they're going to say, I don't want to, Dad. I got buddies coming over. I got somewhere else to go. And so it's like, you got to get creative and say, hey, you want to go to Best Buy? I'll buy you something. I'll get you a video game. And they're going to jump in the car and you get an hour, you get 2 hours. And again, it's that creating that relationship, talking, hanging out. I mean, if you've got daughters, date your daughters. If you've got sons, don't date your sons. Hang with your sons. It's a date, but we don't call it a date. It's, you know, it's the same thing. But, and again, I'm not saying we did it perfectly, but man, every parent of a teenager knows what I'm feeling right now. When they're 16, 17, you're looking at the calendar going, oh my gosh, I've got a year. I've got 50, 60 weeks left. And so you're trying to seize those moments, because once they go to college or leave your house, you don't know how they're coming back. So it's like, you want to grab those moments, get concert tickets and go to a concert, go to a ball game, whatever thing you can do. Go away on a weekend. We did rites of passages with our boys when they were 13. Just be creative and grab some moments to say, I got to develop this relationship. Because if I'm only the mom or dad given a bunch of rules and there's no relationship there, it doesn't guarantee rebellion, but the percentages go up higher. That you're just the guy that puts rules in my life. I don't even know you and you don't know me. So that's why it's so critical.
I think a tip too for this area of building relationships is guys tend to bond through shoulder to shoulder, doing something together as they're talking. For some reason, they've done all these studies with men versus women, and men bond through doing something together, but they also can go really deep as they're sharing a common like hobby or whatever it is, or sport, or just it could be hunting. But women, we bond through face-to-face conversation, which can be intimidating, especially a dad possibly with a daughter. I mean, our friends, the Howlands, they bought a hat tub. So the girls would get in and it would like force Rob, like just to hang in there and just to talk to them. My dad used to take me out for dinner when I was in high school. I loved it because it's face to face. But with the boys, we'd usually do something and talk and go deep as we're doing something. Yeah. I will say this too. Our kids did say, and this I feel like this is on me. I'm kind of the rule person a little bit more. They said that they wish, this is one of them said, I wish instead of being more concerned of what I'm doing to get myself in trouble, I wish you would have asked me more of what's going on in my heart that would make me want to do something, you know, like party or whatever. And he said, you know, it seemed like you were more concerned with my actions than my heart. Now, I don't know if that age when he was in high school, if he could have given me his heart and really communicated that. Yeah. But it made me think like, oh, that's interesting. You know, I wish I would have gone a little deeper into some. I think I was fearful of what they could do to get themselves in trouble and have consequences of that. And that scared me. And so that was a good conversation.
One of the questions I'm proud of that I've laid the foundation with my boys over the years is I'm always asking the question, how's your heart? I'm always asking that question.
It's a great question.
And most of the time I get, it's fine. But every once in a while there's a pause. And I know right there I've got a slight opening. And 10 minutes later, I might have peeled back at least one layer, you know, as to what's really going on. But asking that question, how's your heart first? But over time, it can mean something. So I might be freezing up here a little bit, but I hope that got through. Hey, Dave, one of the things that Andy Stanley said in his book about, what was it about raising the most important thing you might do? What was that?
Yeah, his quote that I heard years ago was, the most important thing you do may not be the job you do, but the person you raise. Yeah. Something like that. It's at the very end of the book. I remember reading it when we did our audio book. I'm like, hey, that's a good quote.
Yeah, that's always stuck with me. It's so good. Let's talk about this. We've only got a couple minutes left, and we do want to take any questions. What you talk about that moment, you talk about in the book. I remember back whatever number of years ago when you first dropped CJ off to school, we had a drama at Kensington. You just walked on the stage and said you said it's coming in 3 weeks, or it just happened 3 weeks ago, or whatever. But talk about that moment when you dropped him off, and as you drive away, what do you look back at it, what you did really well and what you would do differently?
Oh boy. That's a big one. Yeah, I mean, we shared, in our message this morning that our bullseye or our target was to train and launch, love, lock, and live warriors to make a dent where they're sent. That was sort of what we were aiming for. So, that moment when you drop your son or daughter off at college or their job or where they're leaving you to leave the nest, in a sense, it's part of the launching process. We are launching our arrows to the world. So it's a great moment. You dreamed about your whole life. Like I'm looking forward to that moment. But man, when you're in that moment, it's agonizing. I mean, it's awesome, but you're so sad.
It's it's an end of an era.
Yeah.
And it's like, we'll never have that same era back again, and it makes me teary thinking about it. Something really special about having them under our roof.
Yeah. And I remember, and I put it in the book in the chapter on our top 5 parenting mistakes. One of them was, I called it, we didn't do a great job. I didn't do a great job building a college fund. And I use that phrase because everybody thinks about a financial college fund. We're told as parents when our kids are little, put money away for the college fund. And a lot of parents do that. And I would say, do that. Definitely do that. Start now and put away money every month, every year to prepare financially. But what we don't think about is a spiritual college fund. Make deposits every day, every week, every year when your kids are 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, spiritually, to pour into them the word of God and faith. Now, obviously that means Kensington and the church can help, youth group can help, but it's really our job as parents, so that when they go to college, you feel like you're launching them with a foundation spiritually. And I think our kids had that, but I think I could have done a better job.
I think, Brian, I wish we would have had more discussions at our table to create, to help our boys be more critical thinkers, to have discussions about what's happening in the world. And now is the most opportune time, because the things happening in the world now, they should be discussed. And to talk about to be biblical thinkers too. Like, how does the Bible relate to this? And even asking your teens, does it relate? Do you think the Bible is reliable? How does the Bible affect your attitudes toward people, toward racism? I think those are conversations that have to be had. Sometimes I think we were so caught up in sports and getting them off to practice and girlfriends. I wish we'd have had some of those really deep conversations. Probably because we're not that deep. I think we've gotten a little deeper as we've gotten older, but I wish we would have done that. What else?
It's good enough.
Yeah. It's like, that's all.
That's good enough.
They were perfect kids. Hey, here's a question just came in from Joel. I want to ask this question. Did you find did you find a way to nurture healthy competition among your kids? If so, could you talk about this? Because we all know, if you got at least 2, they're comparing themselves to each other. They're wanting to win and do better maybe than they are. What would you say about that? Did you figure out a healthy way to do it?
It's interesting having 3 boys. It was interesting. CJ, our oldest, who was in sports and stuff, he was amazing at celebrating everybody else. Like I don't even have that. I'm so competitive, or like, no, I'm not going to celebrate anybody else. He cheered harder for his brothers than anybody else in the stands. He didn't miss one of Cody's football games. But I think part of it, I think the other 2 struggled a little more because they thought it was important to Dave. Would you say that?
Yeah. I mean, the middle and second and third son were on the same football team in high school. And it was difficult because there was competition, not just between themselves, but on the team, who was better. And, I tried, to celebrate both of them in their giftedness in different ways. I don't know if we did a good job, because it was really a competition that was unavoidable in some ways. I mean, it's just hard not to, it just happened. It was just the way it was.
It would be hard to have the level of like you have an NFL athlete, and so how would you not compare yourself to that? Although Austin was super artistic, singing in a band, like he was so gifted.
And he was a gifted athlete as well. And then Cody ends up going to the NFL. So you have the competition was real. I mean, and we tried, and I think every parent has to just celebrate who they are and what they're good at and try to do your best not to compare. But we all know this sibling rivalry is the oldest comparison game in the Bible. It starts in the garden and it never ends. And if you think you're going to raise kids that don't have that in your home, it's going to happen, And so you just want to try the best you can to love them all as equally as you can.
And I think the greatest gift we can give our kids is to point them to Jesus. Like, I can't remember how many times I said, you need to go to God and just talk to him about that. You need to yell at God and just vent all of your anger and frustration. And I mean, we're always pushing them to Jesus, because we're not their saviors. He is. And that's the gospel.
Yeah. I got another one here. Thank you for that. Dave, you talked about generational sin. You've talked about just having to overcome a lot of things that happened within your own home growing up. And what would you say to parents who are trying to overcome that themselves, and how do they share that with their children as well? Are they honest? Do they need to share their own battles? How the parent is combating it or pushing back against, or trying to right the boat in the right direction? What would you say about that?
Well, I do remember, I put this in the book. I remember when CJ, our oldest, was 9 or 10 years old. I was sitting right down there in the living room, and I said to him, maybe he was 7. I said, hey, I don't know if you've ever heard this concept from the Bible, but it says that the sins of the father will visit down into his sons and beyond, grandkids. I go, CJ, what do you think of that? And again, he's maybe 8 years old, 7, somewhere between 7 and 9, 10 years old. And I'll never forget, he just looks at me and he goes, Dad, don't sin. That was his answer. And I'm like, and he gets up and walks out of the living room, and I was like, wow, he actually understood the concept, as simple as that answer was. He was like, in a sense going, Dad, whatever you're going to do, I just heard you say the Bible says I'm going to struggle with that. And boy, oh boy, is that true. It's unbelievable how the sins of the father and mother, visit down into the generations. And so, one of the questions parents always ask, and we ask the same thing, is, okay, so when do you share your sins with your kids, or do you? And I can remember when Cody was in high school and the other 2 boys were in college, so he's the only one in our home at the time. We'd sit down at dinner, and I remember him looking at us, maybe 16, 17, and saying, hey, so talk about your college years. Did you guys have sex? Did you guys drink? And we're looking at each other like, should we tell them, because part of it's like, if you tell them, then they're going to go, well, look, you turned out fine. So, okay, I guess it's not a big deal. And if we don't tell them, then we're sort of hiding. So we had to decide, like, okay, is that something we want to walk them through?
And we did tell them. In high school, we just thought they need to know our story.
Yeah. I mean, we're telling that story at Kensington anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
But we told it in a way to say, this is who I was.
Yeah.
And this is what Jesus does.
And this is what I regret.
Transformed. Yeah. And this is what I regret. And here are the consequences for some of the bad decisions we made. And if we could go back and do it over, we would not do that. Mm-hmm. And I think I know they would say that was very helpful for them.
I told them about my sexual abuse, because they thought I was like a crazy person when they'd go into a men's restroom. I'm like, oh, guys, you can't, And so I said, this is why I can be a little intense about that area. I've had sexual abuse. And so, I think kids, they want to hear their parents' story. They want to know what Jesus has done in your life too.
Yeah. Speaking of, as your boys grew older and they were asking tough questions, I think I know you share in the book about, even CJ asking some really tough questions about the Bible, right? And just struggling with how he's processing the truth, and even things that are found in the Bible that are tough to reconcile, especially within an engineer's mind, right? A guy who's got a lot of science background probably that he succeeds with too. Um, um, what organizations now, just in regards to older kids walking away from the faith, even kids beyond high school and college? What would you say to them as far as how you handle that as a parent?
Extremely difficult. We did a workshop on the Love Like You Mean It Family Life Marriage Cruise, not this past year because it was canceled in February, but a year before. And we did a workshop for adult parents,
Kids, parents with
parents
adult
of
kids.
adult kids, and sold out. I mean, there were maybe 1,000 people in this workshop. And then we opened the mic and said, what questions do you have? And I'm telling you, parent after parent came up to the mic and asked that question. My kid has walked away. My daughter is a witch. We raised them in the church. We raised them in a Christian home. We raised them in a Christian school.
They're atheists now.
And they walked away. And just a heartache, and you could just hear in their voice, it's my fault. I failed. I didn't do enough. So yeah, that is just such a hard deal. And there's not a lot of easy answers, but I think the biggest thing you can do is obviously pray on your knees, because only God can change a child's heart.
And he can change a child's heart.
And he does. And we say that when people come up and say, I don't want to be married anymore. My spouse, they'll never change. You can't change your spouse. You get on your knees and ask God to do it. It's the same thing with a child. At the same time, the other thing that comes to my mind is continue to live out a dynamic, strong faith in front of your kids. Stop telling them what to do and just live it, model it, and
say less, pray more.
Yeah. And we shared, it's not in our book, but we interviewed a very famous writer, pastor,
Chip Ingram,
a few months ago actually last year on Family Life Today podcast and radio. And, I've known Chip. I love his books. He's written some unbelievable stuff on relationships. And one of his sons, Jason, walked away from the faith, just walked away for a long time.
He said, I don't believe anymore. He is basically the prodigal. He's like, I'm going to fulfill my life and do all the things that I've wanted to do. And he did. And years later, he came back and he told his parents, I've tried everything. I've done everything that I thought would bring fulfillment. And I've realized it didn't fulfill me. And I keep coming back to you guys. I keep coming back to your faith, and I can't deny your faith because I see you living it, and I can't deny it.
Yeah. And what's really cool is some of you that are watching will recognize these words. You say I am loved when I can't feel a thing. Do I sound like Lauren Daigle? You say I am strong when I think I am weak. Chip Ingram's son that walked away from the faith and came back because he couldn't deny his father's faith wrote that song.
Those lyrics with Lauren Daigle.
Jason Ingram writes. He's written several Grammy-winning songs, and one of them was that song, which is all about identity. And it's pretty cool to think, his father just lived it, prayed his guts out. And again, I'm not saying every kid's going to end up doing that. You just don't know, but that's about all you can do.
Yeah,
is
and you
pray
never
and
give
live.
up. You just never give up. Just keep praying. God hears every single one of those prayers.
Yeah, that's great. One of my favorite verses is, and again, I'm also going blank on location, but as for me and my house, we will praise the Lord. And
Joshua 24:15. Joshua, it's one of my favorite verses. Yeah.
There's your seminary degree right there.
I have numbers.
But my favorite part of it, and what I'm reminded of it, as for me, right? As for me, it begins there. And so if my house is not doing it, at least as for me, I'm going to be doing that,
And it's also, I love that verse because it's also a great legacy verse.
More questions.
What?
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? One question and two more questions. One right here. How did your relationship with one another affect your kids? And I guess, one of the things I've loved about you two, in fact, one of my favorite moments from the two of you is how authentic you've been when you have tension. When you two taught on stage a few years back and you had just gotten back from a flight and you had a fight on the flight that Saturday night or whatever, and you hadn't healed from it yet. You hadn't really made up. And yet you were both teaching on the stage and you shared authentically how you were still mad at each other. I could see it in your face. And I just was like, oh my gosh, she's really mad at him still.
We hadn't resolved it yet.
Oh, it was amazing. It was maybe easily top 5, maybe top moment for me.
Oh, great.
We've all been there though. We've all been in that moment. To see it happen on stage was wonderful. But how you connected with each other affect your kids?
I think if you're married,
a little bit of that.
I didn't get the end of that.
Go ahead.
If you're married, the greatest gift you'll give your kids is letting them see a good relationship between you. A healthy marriage is one of the greatest gifts you'll give your kids. Just brings them security. And also, it's so easy to put our kids in front of our marriages because they're so demanding. You know, they take up so much time. And it's interesting. We love our kids unconditionally, but we don't necessarily love our spouses unconditionally. This takes a lot of work. So when our kids see the amount of work it takes, when they see the priority that we put into our marriage, we're setting them up for a great marriage. And I'm telling you, marriages are being crushed today, and our kids are being crushed too. Now, I don't want to put any guilt on you if you're struggling in your marriage or you're divorced or you're blended. And I applaud you guys that are blended, because it takes a lot of work and it's not easy. And I love that you're making it happen. But I think this is really a great gift because it will affect their marriages so much.
And I think a lot of marriages, when this struggles, it's easy to turn your eyes on your kids and find life from them.
Yep.
And put all your energy in them. And I mean, of course you want to bring energy to that. But then when the kids leave, how many times do you see couples get divorced because they didn't have anything?
Mm-hmm.
Right. It was all about the kids, and the kids are not the center of your home. This is. It
Right.
really is more important than that. So it's like, man, you got to do whatever it takes. We put that in the last chapter. One of our big mistakes was we made the kids more important at times than the marriage. It's like, man, you got to date weekly. You got to put the time into this thing. You got to work your tail off on this, because it is the greatest gift you're going to give your kids. And they're going to do what they see mom and dad do eventually when they're adult kids. So, and our kids now are, you know, fighting for their marriage just like we did for ours. And I think it's because they watched us do it. And again, we didn't do it perfectly. That's why we're no perfect parents. Right.
Well, I would say too, just to parents that are divorced out there, I would say how you treat your ex-husband or your ex-wife is an incredible statement to your children.
Great point, Ryan.
Right. So even though you're not joined together in the home, how you treat that person leaves a legacy and an impact on their heart, your child's heart too. So, all right. Last question is this. And Dave and Ann, you both have practiced spiritual disciplines in regard to your parenting. Dave, you talked in the book, and I don't know if you got to it this morning or not. I was back and forth with doing kid stuff, but I think you did in the video that I watched. You mentioned fasting, and just talk about that, the nature of that, where that sprung up for you in your heart, and what you've seen from that, what that's meant for your job as a parent and your family.
You cut out a little bit, but I heard most of your question. Yeah. I mean, the year that our oldest CJ was born, I heard a podcast. It wasn't a podcast back then. It was radio, which shows you how important radio and podcast are. So you better be listening to Family Life Today. Go download the podcast right now on Apple Podcasts. But yeah, it was about taking a day a week and praying for your kids and fasting. So I never thought 35 years later, I'd still be fasting and praying on Fridays for my sons and now their wives and their grandkids, or our grandkids. But yeah, every Friday for the last 35 years, I don't eat till dinner. And so it's a food fast and just pray all day. You know, every time there's a hunger pang, I pray. And I remember praying when they were 5 years old for their wives, that someday they'd be marrying a woman of God, you know, and I'm praying for her right now, wherever she is. I don't know her name. I don't know where she is, that God would protect her and God would put a fire in her heart for Jesus. And so you can imagine, you know, on their wedding days, I'm standing up there at the chapel at Troy campus as the dad and the pastor looking at, you know, Kendall first, and then Robin, and then Jenna. And I'm looking at a woman that I've been praying for before she was born. It was an amazing moment to go, God, I'm so grateful for how you've answered these prayers. And again, I'm not saying fasting and praying guarantees, you know, it's like rubbing the genie and God's going to give you everything you prayed for, but we still do it. Ann does it on Wednesdays. I do it on Fridays. We're just praying now for our legacy, that God would just do what we could never do. And so it's really a day every week to stop and resurrender. It's like you're taking your child and you're putting them on the altar and you're saying, God, they're not mine, they're yours. And I'm going to trust you, even when they're adults and they're going through really, really hard stuff. Again, it's a moment where you got to go, God, I'm trusting that you will walk with them through this. And I'm going to sleep tonight, knowing that I've got a Heavenly Father that cares more about my kids than I even do, and actually can do something that I can never do on their behalf.
There's something super powerful about that too, because I'm going to admit, like as a mom, I can worry about my kids. Gosh, as teenagers, I feel like I didn't sleep very well, and you still do it as adults. They're married, and I can worry about their marriages and our grandkids. And I find myself visualizing handing them over to Jesus, like, okay, Lord, I'm going to let you take care of them and you do this. And I'll just remind all of you that we are in a spiritual war, and there is a battle going on. You know what it is? It's for the family.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, the forces of darkness, it is a real thing. But thank you, Jesus, that his power and authority is greater than that of the evil one. And so by praying and getting on our knees, man, that's the greatest thing you will ever do for your own lives, for your marriage, for your kids. If you're a single parent, if you're a blended family, that's the greatest gift you're going to give yourselves and your kids. It's unbelievable, because God hears you. He hears every single prayer.
And by the way, it's real easy. I'm just thinking there's a parent listening going, yeah, well, my husband won't pray with me.
Yeah.
Or my wife won't pray with me. You know what? Pray yourself. Just pray yourself. There are many times where Ann just prays when I'm not praying. And it's so easy to look at the other person. This isn't about your spouse. This is about you going before God and surrendering your kids. It's our responsibility.
I want to say this. I found a few other questions here just in the Q&A, and one of those was applicable to that, about what you need to do when your spouse isn't living the life, and it's just pursuing God and praying yourself, like you said. So I think you might have this question. How do you balance pouring greatness and affirmation into your children while still emphasizing humility? I think I'd just be curious to hear what you guys have to say about that, because I've seen you pour all of that in, but also how do you give them a spirit of humility at the same time?
I mean, my first thought, right or wrong, is adversity develops humility and gratitude. And I think it's so easy for us as parents to swoop in when our kids are going through a hard time or going through adversity and save them, or remove the adversity from them, or remove them from the adversity. And I would just say, I joked about writing a book called 10 Gifts Every Parent Should Give Their Children. And one of the first gifts we should give them is give them adversity, give them hard, difficult times, because it don't swoop in. If your son or daughter is second string on the team and you think they should be the starter, don't go to the coach and complain. Tell your kid to work their butt off and win the starting job. And if they don't win it, that's okay. It's a life lesson. Don't take them and put them on another team. I mean, that's one of the things going on now in college sports. It's like, I'm not the starter, I'm going to transfer. Okay, that's great. And sometimes it works out, but it's so easy to avoid adversity. Adversity builds character, and we hate it. It's so hard when we go through it. It's even worse when our kids have to go through it. And yet it is one of the things God uses. Pain in our lives develops perseverance. It develops character. And so that's the first thought I have is, man, don't swoop in and save them. Let them go through it. In fact, we had our kids do really hard jobs, mowing yards, shoveling driveways. Both of them, all three of them, two of the three did cement jobs in the summer in high school. And it was hot. Two of them did roofing jobs in the summer. And we had parents tell us that is too dangerous. I would never let my son be on a roof. And we're like, well, we're the bad parents then, because we think it's a great way for them to become men and then learn what hard work is all about. And I'll tell you what, we had one guy at Kensington, I don't know why I'm telling you this, that CJ went to work for him, our oldest son. And after the first week, Ron, it was a cement job. He's a cement guy his whole life. And Ron came up to me at church at Rochester Adams High School at our campus. And he goes, let me tell you something. Your kid doesn't know how to work, man. And I go, what? He goes, he's a terrible worker, man. I mean, he just doesn't know how to work. And I said, Ron, do whatever it takes. I'm giving you full permission and freedom. Make my boy a worker. And he looks at me.
We know this guy, so he's not going to rip him. He's not going to say ridicule him.
Yeah, just make it hard. Right. Just teach him how to be a hard worker. And I'm telling you what, 3 months later, Ron came up to me and said, your kid is a kick butt worker. He responded, and he did. It was really cool. And it was like, look at what God brought to us. He brought us another guy to help make our son a hard worker. And it was a gift, you know? So it was like, yeah. And I could have said, he's not a hard worker. Well, you tell me my kid's not a hard worker. He's a hard worker. In fact, I'll show you, I'm not going to let him work for you anymore. You know, deals. And yet it was a beautiful thing.
It's interesting. I think that as you said that, I thought the world's going to keep them humble. The world's hard on them, and kids and the people are hard on our kids. You don't have to make that happen. But one thing I would say is don't give your kids everything, you know, make them work for their stuff, like what Dave said. And here's another thing. We praised them and we spoke life into them, but a lot of that was identity stuff and character traits. It wasn't so much of like, hey, you're the smartest, which they were. You can still praise that, but you know, you're so good looking, and those are all true, and that's good too. But we really praise character traits and identity traits. And so I don't think you can get enough of that stuff. Now, did we still have rules and all that stuff? Absolutely. And we were honest with them and told them, like, man, your behavior really stinks right now. It's hard to be around you when you act like this. So I don't think you have to worry about the humble thing.
Well, thank you for sharing your love and your wisdom with us tonight. It's been a great gift, very much. I was joking with Susan before we started, when a few people may have been on, I said, you know, after a long day, Dave's probably laying on the couch wondering if anybody's going to tune in. He's texting me, how many people are coming? And I'm so glad you did, because we needed to hear from you tonight. So thank you for your energy and being here with us. Really
great. It was our privilege. We got to get up at 5 a.m. and jump on a flight tomorrow. So
well,
it was
a
long day.
We're happy to be with you.
If we can ask this, because I know my mic, I might break up. So can you both just pray us out tonight as we close out?
Yeah.
We'd love to.
I'll start us. Father, thank you. Thank you for everybody listening. Lord, we need your help. We're desperate for it, actually, whether our kids are babies or they're adults. Like, we can't do anything apart from you. So God, I pray for blessing on these parents, for the single moms, for the single dads, for the blended families that are trying to get their families together. For maybe the stepmom or dad that, you know, they're raising kids that aren't even biologically theirs, but you know that they have everything that's in them to help be the parent to these kids. So I pray that you would give us wisdom, that you would give us perseverance, and Lord, that more than anything, we'd hear your voice and you give us direction of what you want us to do. And we would seek you first and who you say that we are. Thank you for the gospel. Thank you for grace. Thank you for forgiving us and for giving us do-overs, because Lord, we need a lot of them. And I thank you that you are a good, good Father, and we can lay our kids, our relationships at your feet, knowing that you're bigger and better than anything we can do for our kids.
And Lord, I pray for the moms, that you give them patience and wisdom beyond human wisdom, supernatural wisdom. You say, if we ask, you give. So I pray for that for moms. I pray for dads to be leaders and to reject passivity and to step into leadership in their home, both spiritually and emotionally. I know it's a big challenge. Man, I pray for men to step up, and I pray for homes to be blessed by you. And I pray for power. We cannot do it without the Holy Spirit power of you, God, in us. So I pray for complete surrender, my moms and dads, of their own lives and of their family and of their kids. And we ask that you would do in our kids what we can never do, and you would do through our kids what we could never do. So we surrender again our lives, our families, our legacy, and our kids to you, and ask you to do what you do, immeasurably more than we could even imagine. And we trust you for that. And we thank you in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you everybody for your time tonight. And some of you asked some questions in the Q&A, and we are going to take photos of those, and we're going to do our best to get those answers back to you if we didn't get to them tonight. So
cool.
Stay tuned.
And if you want, if we can help you at all, just reach out to us, Dave Ann Wilson, on Facebook or Instagram. Just direct message us, and we've been answering a lot of parenting questions in the last week. Again, not saying we're perfect or have all the answers, but that's one easy way to find us.
Thank you, Dave, and so much time. And thank you for your book and books, both of them. And just thank you for all you've done for marriages and for us as parents as well through all the years. I'm blessed and honored to know you and have you as friends. So thank you.
You too,
Thanks,
Ryan. Thanks.
Love you guys.
Good night, everybody.
All right. See ya.